Envision a radiant day in 1947 Los Angeles. A mother and her offspring accidentally encounter a terrifying spectacle in Lymert Park. The peacefulness of the day is abruptly disrupted by the discovery of a traumatizing scene. A young woman, Elizabeth Short, is found, her body horribly disfigured in a way that would soon envelop the city in a cloak of terror and fascination. This is far from a standard crime scene. The body, severed in two with surgical accuracy, is arranged in a manner that appears almost intentional, introducing a bone-chilling element to the already sight. The city vibrates with shock and morbid intrigue. Here in the City of Angels, such a malevolent deed seems out of place, unimaginable. The striking difference between the sunny, palm-fringed streets and the grisly crime scene establishes the atmosphere for a conundrum that would remain unsolved for many years. The scene is prepared. The characters in this macabre play are unknowingly forced into the limelight. Thus begins a saga that would transform a hopeful Hollywood hopeful into the notorious Black Dahlia. The City of Angels was on the brink of diving into one of its deepest puzzles. Who was this woman brutally discarded in the city's park? Enter Elizabeth Short, known posthumously as the Black Dahlia. Born and raised in the bustling city of Boston, Elizabeth possessed ambitions as vast as the cosmos. With a twinkling in her eye and a heart brimming with aspiration, she set her sights on the city of dreams, Los Angeles. Her goal? To see her name brilliantly illuminated on the silver screen. The epithet Black Dahlia wasn't of her making, but rather a result of the media's penchant for sensationalism that enveloped her life and death. The name was a play on a famous film of the era, The Blue Dahlia, coupled with tales of Short's fondness for donning black attire. This ominously poetic nickname, along with the gruesome details of her demise, further intensified public interest. Elizabeth Short, the Black Dahlia, was more than a mere headline. She was a young woman brimming with hopes and dreams, cruelly cut short. She yearned for recognition, but gained infamy in an unimaginable manner. Her narrative was greatly magnified by the media's meddling in the investigation that ensued her death. Their unrelenting quest for a sensational tale at the cost of truth often hampered the course of the case. Elizabeth Short's existence was abruptly and savagely terminated, leaving behind a trail of unanswered queries. But who would desire to terminate the life of this young aspirant in such a savage manner? Savage, as the shock receded, the pursuit for justice commenced. The Los Angeles Police Department and the Federal Bureau of Investigation were about to confront a case like no other. The initial investigation began with a surge of action. The LAPD and the FBI, two of the most esteemed law enforcement agencies in the nation, were both on the case. The scene was scrutinized meticulously for clues, every lead was chased, and no stone was left unturned. The sheer brutality of the crime imprinted a chilling effect on those who were tasked with solving it. This wasn't just any case. Elizabeth Short, now globally known as the Black Dahlia, was found in such a terrifying condition that it sent tremors through the community. The gruesome nature of her death and the mutilation of her body introduced a layer of complexity to the case that the investigators hadn't foreseen. As the days morphed into weeks, the difficulties encountered by the investigators began to pile up. The case was engulfed in mystery, with no transparent motive or suspect emerging from the initial stages of the investigation. The pressure was mounting, and with each passing day, the prospects of solving this terrible crime seemed to diminish. Adding to the investigators' troubles, the media was in a state of chaos. The Black Dahlia case had seized the public's interest, and journalists were keen to exploit the public's infatuation. Information was trickled out, rumors were disseminated, and theories were conceived. The relentless media circus surrounding the investigation was feeding the public's appetite for details, but simultaneously obstructing the progress of the investigation. Despite the investigators' best attempts, the case was growing frigid. The initial surge of action had decelerated, and with no fresh leads or suspects, the investigation was at a deadlock. The Black Dahlia case, one of the most notorious unsolved mysteries in American history, was proving to be as elusive as ever. With no clear leads, the theories began to accumulate. The investigation into the murder of Elizabeth Short, also known as the Black Dahlia, hit dead ends, and theories began to collect. A range of theories emerged, each more captivating and enigmatic than the former. One prominent theory suggested the murderer's medical background due to the precision of Elizabeth's body dissection. Thoughts pointed at a surgeon, a medical student, or even a butcher as the perpetrator. A suspicion towards Hollywood insiders arose, assuming Elizabeth was punished for her unattained dreams of fame. This assumption was propelled by the dramatic representation of the crime scene, resembling a grisly movie scene. Then there were speculations about Elizabeth's acquaintances and lovers. Suspects included Mark Hansen, a nightclub owner, and Robert Red Manley, the last person known to have seen Elizabeth alive. Despite their connections with Elizabeth, neither could be definitively linked to the crime. More extravagant theories speculated the involvement of organized crime and corrupt cops, picturing Elizabeth as a pawn in a larger power play. As time advanced, the theories became more complex. Some even suggested that the killer was a rival woman, envious of Elizabeth's beauty. This theory was supported by the fact that Elizabeth's body was arranged in a manner that appeared to mock her femininity. But in spite of the accumulation of theories and suspects, none could be proven beyond a shadow of doubt. The LAPD and FBI followed every lead, interrogated every suspect, and scrutinized every piece of evidence. But the murderer's identity remained as elusive as a phantom. The murder of the Black Dahlia, one of the most notorious unsolved mysteries in American history, continues to perplex us. The theories and suspects continue to multiply, each adding a new depth to the mystery surrounding Elizabeth Short's death. Yet with all these accumulating, the identity of the murderer remained elusive. Over 7 decades later, the Black Dahlia murder continues to captivate and baffle. The enduring mystery of who killed Elizabeth Short, a young woman who aspired to Hollywood fame, incites a wave of public fascination that shows no sign of remission. The question surrounding Short's cruel end has become lodged in our popular culture, finding its place in a multitude of books, each insinuating its unique interpretation of the events that culminated in her premature death. Biographies to crime novels, the Black Dahlia narrative has been perpetuated, yet the facts remain elusive. The case has made its presence known in the world of film, portrayed through a spectrum of angles from noir cinema to contemporary thrillers, enhancing the enigma surrounding Short's existence and demise. The allure of the unsolved case, the somber narrative of a young woman's ambition morphed into a horrific reality, continues to engage audiences across the globe. The of the Black Dahlia, however, extends beyond literary pages or cinematic reels. The case continues to pique the interest of crime hobbyists and professional sleuths alike. Despite the passage of decades, fresh theories and potential leads continue to arise, keeping the case vibrant in the collective consciousness. The Black Dahlia murder has also profoundly influenced how we perceive and converse about criminality. It serves as a grim reminder of society's sinister undercurrents and emphasizes the significance of unyielding pursuit for justice, irrespective of time. The Dahlia murder remains one of the oldest unsolved cases in Los Angeles County, a haunting testament to a life brutally abbreviated and a mystery that continues to hold us spellbound to this day. Seemingly peaceful beach, but beneath its calm facade lurks a terrifying. The Long Island serial killer case is a perplexing enigma that has left detectives and true crime aficionados puzzled. Welcome to a head-spinning mystery that has captured the interests of many. Visualize Long Island, New York, noted for its scenic ocean parkway, its sandy beaches, and series of grotesque murders that have horrified the country. The victims, predominantly sex workers, were discovered along this very parkway. Their remains displayed a terrifying pattern indicative of a single unidentified culprit. The victims were not just numbers, they were women, young online escorts who encountered a fate they did not merit. The tale unfolds from the disappearance of a woman named Shannon Gilbert, whose case led to the recovery of the remains of Maureen Brainard Barnes, Amber Costello, Megan Waterman and Melissa Barthélemy. These women shared uncanny commonalities, their lives abruptly terminated by a monster hiding in plain sight. Accusations of police corruption have further complicated an already intricate investigation. Despite these challenges, the authorities remain relentless. A new task force was organized in 2022, aimed to finally bring resolution to this terrifying case. Their main suspect? an architect named Rex Heuermann connected to the victims through DNA evidence and burner phone records. Yet, even with these clues, the true identity of the Long Island serial killer remains a mystery. Heuermann, in spite of the accumulating evidence against him, remains a suspect in a case that has stalled investigators for over a decade. A conundrum that remains unsolved, a murderer who remains nameless. Now let's introduce a curveball to the narrative, a significant breakthrough, a moniker. We now focus on Rex Heuermann, a name that now resonates with the infamous Long Island serial killings. Trained as an architect, Heuermann was prosecuted for the murder of Maureen Brainard Barnes, a case that stayed unsolved for 17 long years. The proof against Heuermann is persuasive. DNA and cell phone records connected him to Brainard Barnes and 3 other victims. The exploration unearthed a disturbing sequence. Each victim, all petite online escorts in their 20s, had burner phone connections with their assailant before vanishing. These weren't arbitrary acts of aggression, but a methodical predatory pattern. The case took an unforeseen twist when it started exposing allegations of police misconduct. Doubts surfaced about whether the force had been tarnished and if this had enabled the murderer to evade capture for years. What was once a straightforward case now turned into a labyrinth of deceit and mistrust. The prosecution of Heuermann nonetheless brought a sense of reprieve to the community. The beast now had a face, a moniker, and wasn't just an obscure figure lurking in the shadows. However, the disclosures also cast a dark shadow over the idyllic Long Island, a place once equated with tranquility and peace. This case, with its curveballs, serves as a reminder of the thin facade of normalcy that can hide the darkest of human instincts. It pays tribute to the persistence of investigators who, despite years and numerous dead ends, remained unyielding. The serene beach doesn't seem so tranquil anymore, does it? It's a disquieting reminder that even in the most peaceful of places, evil can hide just beneath the surface. Behind every atrocity, there are the faces we should never overlook, the victims. Amidst the enigma of the Long Island mystery, 4 casualties emerge: Maureen Brainard Barnes, Amber Costello, Megan Waterman and Melissa Barthelemy. All were young, petite women striving to make a living through online escort services, a world that often turned a blind eye towards them. Their existence, though diverse in many ways, was marked by a horrifying commonality, a thread that to their premature demise. Maureen Brainard Barnes, the first casualty, disappeared in 2007. An ambitious single mother from Norwich, Connecticut, she strived to build a brighter future for her offspring. It was 3 years later when her remains were discovered in the marshland near Gilgo Beach, sparking a chilling investigation that sent tremors through the community. Amber Costello, the second casualty, hailed from North Babylon, New York. Remembered for her lively persona and compassionate nature, her existence was brutally cut short, leaving behind a cloud of questions and a family yearning for answers. Megan Waterman, belonging to South Portland, Maine, was the third casualty. A young, spirited mother, her disappearance in 2010 left a void in the life of me. An aspiring hairdresser, the Bronx, New York, was the fourth acknowledged casualty. Her dreams of a brighter tomorrow were snatched away, leaving behind a legacy of questions unanswered and a family in grief. These women, all casualties of the same perpetrator, were linked not just by their profession, but also by their shared fate. Their lives, tragically cut short, have become symbols of an unresolved case that continues to confound investigators and captivate the nation. Their narratives cry out for justice from the afterlife. As the old adage goes, the devil is in the details. It was these seemingly insignificant details that began to paint a foreboding picture. The quest for answers led the investigators down an unexpected trail: burner phones. These one-time use devices, commonly associated with illicit activities, began to surface as crucial evidence. Each interaction, every call and message, was akin to a breadcrumb guiding them deeper into the labyrinth of this intricate investigation. But who was on the receiving end of these calls? Who was the mysterious voice luring these victims into their doom? The answer, as it turns out, led to a single name: Rex Heuermann. A man known for his work as an architect, a moulder of dreams. But could he also be a bringer of nightmares? In 2022, a new task force was assembled, a team of bright minds united to unravel the knots of this convoluted case. Their investigation began to zero in on Heuermann, the man seemingly behind the burner phones, But it wasn't just the phones that implicated him. DNA, the very blueprint of life, was also pointing towards him. The evidence, it appeared, was slowly but surely forming a damning narrative. However, despite the growing pile of evidence, skepticism endured. Was it all too neat, too tidy? Could one man truly be behind such a series of horrific acts? Or were there hidden forces at work, controlling the story? Net tightens, the noose is set. But is the right man in the crosshairs? In the realm of crime, nothing is ever as it appears. Purported involvement of Rex Heuermann, the architect turned suspect, is a testament to this in the Long Island serial killer case. Heuermann was prosecuted for the murder of Maureen Brainerd Barnes, a member of the dreaded Gilgo 4 victims, but the indictment didn't end there. He was also implicated in the murders of 3 women, all known sex workers. The proof? DNA and cell phone information, a disconcerting reminder of how technology can serve both as a blessing and a curse. Yet, despite these allegations, the case remains unresolved. The narrative of the Long Island serial killer is far from over. Probes are with detectives treating each lead as a sniffer dog would a scent. But like any good enigma, more questions emerge with every step forward. Is Heuermann culpable for other unresolved homicides? Are there more victims yet be unearthed? And what about the claims of police corruption that lurk around this case? Dark suggestions that imply wicked undercurrent within the very establishment designed to enforce justice. The Long Island serial case, akin to the opaque waters of the marshes where the victims were found, is an enigma yet to be fully deciphered. It serves as a stark reminder that malevolence can hide in the least expected places, such as the peaceful suburbs of Long Island. As we probe further into this gruesome narrative, we are left with a feeling of discomfort and curiosity. We are eager a resolution for justice to be delivered, but we hold our breath. We wait for the concluding chapter of this tale to be penned, for the final fragments of this horrifying puzzle to come together. In the end, only time will reveal if justice will be served. Until then, the enigma of the Long Island serial killer continues to haunt us. Envision a tranquil hamlet, suddenly startled awake by a horrifying nightmare come to life. It's June 1912, and the peaceful quiet of Villisca, Iowa, is dramatically disrupted by a crime that continues to cast a long, dark shadow over the torn pages of American history. The Villisca Axe Murders. A family of 6, the Moores, and 2 young guests were silenced forever in their slumber, their lives extinguished under the unseeable veil of a midsummer's night. As the dawn of June 10th pierced the darkness, the horrifying truth began to infiltrate the consciousness of this close-knit community. The home of the Moore family, once ringing with joy and laughter, had turned into the grim setting of a crime. The victims were found in a nightmarish state of eternal sleep, their bodies bearing the cruel mark of an axe's remorseless edge. However, what sent a bone-chilling shiver down the spine of those brave enough to enter that house of terror were the strange details added to the scene, eerie elements that whispers of a lunatic's craftsmanship. The elder Moores, Josiah and Sarah, were discovered lifeless, their faces shrouded by bed linens, the axe lying beside them as if part of a warped tableau. In the lower part of the house, the visiting Stillinger sisters, Lena and Ina, were found in a similar horrifying situation, their youthful innocence permanently tainted by the gruesome scene. All mirrors and glass throughout the house were covered, a chilling attribute that sent a wave of fear through the heart of the town. Nevertheless, life in Villisca had to continue. The townsfolk, now consumed with dread and mistrust, could only watch as investigators descended upon their once peaceful sanctuary. The serene community was forever altered, its peace torn apart by a crime so monstrous it seemed to belong in the chapters of a Gothic horror story rather than their quiet of Iowa. As the dawn broke over Villisca, Iowa, a grotesque mystery was just starting to unravel. The hamlet was forever marked, its innocence stolen by an unthinkable terror. And as we explore deeper into the abyss of this unresolved crime, we grapple with the chilling reminder of the malevolence that can hide behind the facade of the ordinary. The tranquil town was abruptly plunged into turmoil, and the gears of justice commenced their rotation, albeit with some reluctance. The initial phases of the Villisca Axe Murder inquiry were marked by daunting difficulties. The ferocious nature of the crime, compounded by the sheer tally of victims, 6 of whom were children, sent reverberations of shock and horror through the close-knit community. This was more than just a felony. It was an unimaginable calamity that rattled the town's very sense of peace and safety. Under tremendous pressure to crack the case, law enforcement began probing into potential culprits. Reverend George Kelly, a visiting preacher with an odd curiosity about the case, rapidly fell under suspicion. Kelly was put on trial twice, but the absence of solid proof resulted in his discharge. Regardless, his association with the case layered an ominous edge to an already spine-chilling crime. Other persons of interest included Frank F. Jones, a distinguished business personality, and William Mansfield, a man of questionable character. However, irrespective of the myriad of suspects, the investigation reached a standstill. There were no fingerprints, no discernible motive, and no irrefutable evidence to implicate any one person. Town was on tenterhooks, wrestling with the horror and uncertainty that such a grievous act could occur in their presence. It was about more than just apprehending the offender. It was about restoring the sense of security that had been so ruthlessly broken. The horrific act spurred significant amendments in legislation, with the aspiration that improved laws could thwart such monstrosities in the future. Nevertheless, the spectre of the Villisca Axe Murders hung heavily, throwing a dark veil over the town's future. The investigation, while comprehensive, was laden with intricacies. Hypotheses surfaced, suspects were interrogated, and trials were conducted. Yet, the assassin remained at large, the enigma intensifying with each passing day. However, with a plethora of suspects and scarce evidence, the journey to justice was twisted and complex. In the pursuit of truth, sometimes the innocent become collateral damage. The search for facts in the Villisca Axe Murders case was littered with obstacles and challenges. The most puzzling of these surrounded an unexpected figure, Reverend George Kelly. You might be wondering, a clergyman, really? But as the narrative unfolded, the Reverend found himself entangled in the complex web of this shocking mystery. Kelly, a roaming minister present in Villisca on the night of the murders. Known for his passionate sermons and unconventional conduct, his link to the crime was tenuous at best. Nevertheless, the urgency to crack the case resulted in his apprehension, and he found himself in the dock not once but twice for the savage homicides. The initial trial concluded with a hung jury, signifying the controversial nature of the evidence presented against him. The subsequent trial, however, was a breather for the Reverend, as he was absolved, stepping out of the court a liberated man. But these trials were more than a mere quest for facts. They mirrored the public sentiment, the terror that had seized the nation, and the intense longing for resolution. They were high-profile, attracting eyeballs from distant places, morphing into a grim spectacle for the public. The impact of the Villisca Axe and the subsequent trials reverberated far beyond the court's walls. They paved the way for legislative alterations, stirring up the political environment and triggering a reassessment of the judiciary. The case served as a springboard for reform, a chilling reminder of the depth of human malevolence and the extent society would go to administer justice. However, even the intense scrutiny of the courtroom failed to shed light on the dark aspects of this case. As time passed, the truth seemed to recede further into the shadows. The Villisca Axe Murders, a dark chapter in the chronicles of American crime, have been a topic of ceaseless conjecture and numerous postulations. With no one ever held responsible, the array of clues has led many down the labyrinth of possibilities, each more spellbinding than the former. One postulation that has garnered significant attention is the probability of a link to similar axe murders in different places. The pattern of savagery, the weapon of choice, and the senseless character of the crimes sketch a chilling portrait of a wandering assailant, possibly even a serial murderer, leaving a path of blood and horror behind him. This postulation, while unsettling, provides a plausible reason for the seemingly random and brutal character of the Villisca murders. Then there's the circulating conjecture about a potential serial killer. The notion that a single individual could be accountable for such a series of violent crimes is both fascinating and petrifying. It's a postulation that has propelled innumerable documentaries, books, and even films as people hunt for answers in the obscure angles of the case of Reverend George Kelly, put on trial twice but ultimately absolved, has also roused its fair share of theories. Some postulate he was the offender, eluding law due to a lack of solid evidence. Others contend he was a fall guy, his peculiar demeanor and later admissions the result of a stressed and shattered individual. In spite of the multitude of theories and conjectures, the truth remains concealed. The Villisca Axe Murders have turned into a century-old enigma, a conundrum that continues to puzzle and charm those who dare to plunge into it. The ceaseless pursuit for answers has transformed the case into a lasting emblem of our communal fascination with unresolved crimes and the murkier side of nature. Thus, the Villisca Axe Murders remain an enigmatic puzzle, a century-old conundrum cloaked in mystery. Today, the reverberations of that dreadful night still echo in Villisca. Over the course of 100 years, the Villisca Axe Murders have left a lasting imprint on the town and its inhabitants. The horrifying event of 8 innocent lives being taken has deeply impacted the collective memory of Villisca. The Villisca Axe Murder House, where the grim event took place, stands as an eerie reminder of the town's unsettling past. It has become a magnet for tourists, attracting people from around the globe. These visitors, driven by curiosity, walk through its rooms, while the brave ones dare to stay overnight, all seeking to comprehend or experience the residual terror of the past. The influence of the Villisca Axe Murders is not confined within the town's boundaries. This unsolved case has been the muse for numerous documentaries, movies and books, each attempting to untangle the mystery and highlight the darkness that descended upon Villisca that fateful June night in 1912. The speculation, theories and the enduring fascination continue to fuel the enigma of the murders. Furthermore, the case has greatly influenced the broader discourse around criminal investigations, emphasizing the complexities and challenges that often accompany such probes. The spectres of the past persist in Villisca, a grim reminder of a crime that remains an enigma even today. A chilling saga that refuses to fade away, the legacy of the Villisca Axe Murders continues to captivate and horrify, a tale that remains alive despite the passing of over 100 years. Envision Northern California, late 1960s. A palpable sense of dread and enigma pervades the air. The cause, a serial murderer dubbed the Zodiac Killer, is at large. This terrifying label labels a figure that would loom ominously over the Bay Area. Appearing as if from thin air, the Zodiac Killer made his presence known through a shocking sequence of homicides. Innocent young couples, blissfully oblivious, soon found themselves in this faceless predator's crosshairs. Their tranquil Californian nights abruptly and violently interrupted by the arrival of the hunter. But his thirst for violence didn't end there. An unsuspecting male cab driver also fell victim to this faceless dread, his existence snuffed out in the bustle of the city. And then the murderer did something unexpected. He reached out, not to law enforcement. No, he made his stage the press. The newspapers became his theatre, his personal playground. The public, his entranced spectators. Baffling messages began to emerge, cryptic codes that seemed to ridicule the very efforts to apprehend him. He was brazen, audacious even, claiming responsibility for not just the 5 murders that were already sending tremors through the community, but a jaw-dropping 37. The Zodiac Killer wasn't simply a murderer. He was an entertainer, a puzzle shrouded in a conundrum. He toyed with the public's fears, tightening the grip of terror with each fresh message he dispatched. As 1969 drew to a close, the residents of Northern California could only observe, anticipate and ponder. Who was the Zodiac Killer? And where would he strike next? Consider this. The Zodiac found his thrill not only in the act of murder, but in the torment of the authorities, baiting them with cryptogram letters. The Zodiac indeed was a creator of terror, a genius of fear. His killing spree wasn't just about death. He crafted his wicked deeds into a terrifying show. Picture yourself in the late 60s and early 70s, a time of peace and love. Yet in Northern California, a haunting shadow looms. The Zodiac didn't end with that was merely his opening act. He released cryptograms to local newspapers, complex puzzles laced with threats and boasts. These weren't just letters, they were challenges issued to the police, provocations tossed at the face of law enforcement. And the civilians? They were trapped in between, their daily newspapers delivering a daily dose of terror with their morning coffee. Let's not ignore the Zodiac's trademark, his symbol, a circle with a cross intersecting it. This icon, straightforward yet frightening, evolved into a sign of horror, a stark reminder of the man who gripped a city with his cryptic messages and savage deeds. Even though the Zodiac sent many cryptograms, one remains undeciphered. It's like an unraveled thread, a mystery encapsulated in a conundrum. We have all these fragments, but the puzzle is still missing a piece. The secrets it may contain, the insights it might provide into the psyche of the Zodiac Killer. It's a haunting reminder of the Zodiac's enigmatic game, a game that for now remains unresolved. Despite multitude of cryptograms, one continues to baffle experts, a haunting echo of the Zodiac's enigmatic game. As the death toll escalated, so did the urgency of the investigation. The California Department of Justice has been tirelessly working on the Zodiac Murders case since 1969. The probe into the Zodiac Killer was an intense, high-pressure endeavor. The law enforcement, desperate to halt the violence, mobilized every available resource for the manhunt. A myriad of theories bloomed, with some attributing the killings to a fanatic astrologer and others to a disgruntled military personnel. The roster of suspects was diverse and extensive, but none could be definitively associated with the crimes. Arthur Allen, a name that would become inextricably linked with the Zodiac investigation, surfaced as a key suspect. A convicted child molester with a bizarre fascination for hunting, Allen was a man who matched the profile. Even his own acquaintances thought him capable of such horrors. Nevertheless, despite thorough surveillance, search warrants, and even a direct conversation, the police could not assemble enough proof to indict him. The absence of definitive evidence was a persistent issue throughout the investigation. The authorities were handling a criminal genius who left limited clues. The obscure messages delivered to newspapers were diligently dissected, but the killer's identity remained concealed within the intricate codes. The tangible evidence was meager. The Zodiac was cautious, almost to the point of obsession, leaving the detectives with an abundance of uncertainties. Every fresh lead, every potential suspect, every deciphered message appeared to bring them no nearer to the truth. The Zodiac Killer was a spectre, always a stride ahead of the law. He mocked them, dared them, and then vanished into the darkness. Despite the relentless pursuits of the investigators, the identity of the Zodiac Killer remained elusive. The case, still active, serves as a stark testament to the challenges of criminal investigation. A faceless threat, a code never fully cracked, the Zodiac Killer continues to linger in the chronicles of American crime history. Over half a century has passed since the Zodiac Killer's reign of terror. Yet his legacy endures in literature, cinema, and the collective psyche of true crime aficionados. The Zodiac Killer's identity remains a subject of intense debate. There are numerous suspects, including Arthur Lee Allen and Earl Van Best, Jr., but no definitive evidence has yet emerged to unmask this elusive murderer. The mystery of the Zodiac Killer's identity remains a subject of intrigue and continues to spark countless theories and investigations. This ongoing enigma has deeply permeated our cultural fabric. His chilling letters, cryptic ciphers, and audacious taunting of law enforcement have captivated our collective curiosity. These elements have been cemented and immortalized in a myriad of literature, scrutinizing each facet of the case, each potential suspect, each conceivable clue. Cinema has not been impervious to the Zodiac's charm. Numerous films inspired by the Zodiac Killer have sought to dramatize his chilling exploits, to probe the psyche of this unidentified murderer, to delve into the desperate attempts to unmask him. Through these portrayals, the Zodiac Killer has become an enduring, iconic figure of terror, subtly influencing literature, cinema, and the ongoing fascination among true crime enthusiasts. His story continues to inspire intense debate and speculation, fueling our collective fascination with this unsolved mystery. So, who was the Zodiac Killer? That's the question worth $1 million. Despite numerous theories and suspects, the case remains a conundrum. This scene will delve into the enduring enigma of the Zodiac Killer's identity, a puzzle that continues to captivate us even after half a century. Suspects aplenty have been named, yet the actual Zodiac Killer remains elusive. The California Department of Justice maintains an open case file, reflecting the ongoing interest and the hope that one day the truth will be revealed. From Arthur Lee Allen to Earl Van Best Jr., numerous individuals have been put in the spotlight, yet none have been definitively identified as the perpetrator behind the enigmatic letters and brutal killings. The fascination isn't limited to law enforcement. The general public can't seem to disassociate themselves from the spectre of the Zodiac. An array of books, films, and endless conjecture continue to keep this case in the public eye. It almost seems as if the Zodiac Killer has managed to extend his reign of terror beyond his active years, engaging us all in a grim guessing game. Despite the shadowy nature of the case, there's a peculiar sense of cynicism to it all. Here we are, in the 21st century, still endeavoring to decipher messages from a man who likely wore bell-bottoms and listened to the Beatles on vinyl. It gives the impression that the Zodiac Killer, wherever he might be, is having the last laugh. The truth could be lurking somewhere in the maze of clues, theories, and half-hearted presumptions. But until that truth is unearthed, the Zodiac Killer remains an enigma, a spectral figure haunting the dark corners of America's criminal history. As probe further into this mystery, we're left with more questions than we have answers. The Zodiac Killer, an enigma wrapped in a riddle, remains at large in the annals of America's unsolved mysteries.
In the deepest recesses of London's Whitechapel district, in the year of 1888, a malevolent entity materialized from obscurity. This was an epoch when the city paradoxically embodied opulence and destitution. The Whitechapel district, specifically, was a cesspool of societal upheaval, indigence, and overpopulation. Within this chaotic milieu, a predator discovered an optimal hunting sphere. Inaugural documented casualty, Mary Ann Nichols, was discovered on a dreary dawn at the conclusion of August, her existence snuffed out under the most savage circumstances. She was a woman compelled to trade her virtue for survival. A grim destiny shared many destitute women in the district. Her throat bore the cruel incision of a blade, her abdomen horrifyingly desecrated, a horrifying preface to the monstrous modus operandi of malefactor, who would later be labeled as Jack the Ripper. Word of the grisly detection spread rapidly. London's press, perpetually in pursuit of a sensational narrative, pounced on the murder with grotesque enthusiasm. They oscillated between terror and fascination, the raw brutality of the crime, the enigma shrouding the culprit, and the vulnerability of the victim amalgamated to form a ghastly allure. This fervent media scrutiny ignited an escalating panic, insinuating a bone-chilling layer to the saga. The byways of Whitechapel, already laden with adversities and peril, transformed into a platform for a gruesome spectacle. The prologue had commenced, the characters were in place, and the spectators, the entire metropolis of London, observed with suspended anxiety. The scene was prepared for an unprecedented reign of terror. Consequently, the reign of terror was set into motion, as the initial of the canonical five succumbed to the Ripper's blade. Whitechapel's thoroughfares were soon to be awash in scarlet once more, as the Ripper's reign of terror continued unabated. Merely 7 days following the ruthless slaying of Mary Ann Nichols, another woman's life was snuffed out in the still pre-dawn hours. The victim was Annie Chapman, a 47-year-old who, akin to Nichols, had turned to humanity's most ancient occupation to keep herself from destitution. The savagery of her demise astonished even the most jaded. A violent gash marred her throat, and her abdomen was clinically eviscerated. The Ripper wasn't merely a murderer. He was a defacer, a tormentor of women. With the ghastly news rippling through the borough, a bone-chilling dread began to clutch the denizens of Whitechapel. The once vibrant lanes were shrouded in a spectral hush, the nocturnal silence punctuated only by the sporadic sound of frantic footfalls reverberating off the ancient stones. The Ripper had claimed 2 lives, and none could predict when his sickening desire would strike again. They didn't have to wonder for long. On September 30th, over the course of one single harrowing night, the Ripper added 2 more victims to his grisly tally. Elizabeth Stride and Catherine Eddowes were subjected to the same horrifying fate as Nichols and Chapman. Their throats were brutally severed, their bodies cruelly disfigured, their human forms transformed into macabre canvases for the Ripper's grotesque handiwork. Stride's remains were discovered in Dutfield's yard, just off Berner Street, her throat bearing a deep laceration. The same evening, mere blocks away, Eddowes' body was unearthed in Mitre Square. The atrocities inflicted upon her surpassed the horrors that befell her predecessors. Her visage had been savagely mutilated, her abdomen gruesomely disemboweled. The Ripper's methods were escalating, his signature becoming increasingly nightmarish with each new atrocity. Now, with 4 casualties, the city was in the clutches of a nameless terror that refused to dissipate. The once lively lanes of Whitechapel had morphed into a hunting ground for a merciless predator, a place where the shadows concealed unimaginable terrors, and where death could come as swiftly as the swing of a butcher's blade. As the ghastly spectacle of the Ripper's murderous frenzy approached its final curtain, it prepared to unveil one last scene of unspeakable horror. Our narrative now pivots to Mary Jane Kelly, the ultimate in the infamous quintet of victims, a woman beleaguered by misfortune, compelled to trade her companionship for sustenance in the grimy recesses of Victorian London. The unfortunate circumstances of her existence led her to cross paths with a fiend, a rendezvous that culminated in a tableau of unrivaled terror. The Ripper, it appeared, had reserved his most barbaric exhibition for the concluding act. Mary Jane Kelly's downfall represented the apex of his monstrous exploits. Her remains were discovered in her lodgings, a spectacle so horrendous that it unsettled even the most steeled individuals. The amplification of brutality was evident. The Ripper was not merely a slayer, but a man hell-bent on etching a permanent imprint of dread. The societal response was one of utter pandemonium. The alleyways of Whitechapel were no longer merely cloaked in penury and despair, but now they were prowled by an enigmatic phantom capable of striking without warning. The murmurs of Jack the Ripper reverberated through the labyrinth of lanes, a bone-chilling testament to the peril concealed in the obscurity. And yet, amidst the fear, the city's life force continued to throb, its pulse resilient against the engulfing apprehension. The denizens of Whitechapel, though traumatized, were tenacious. They were left with no choice. After all, survival was not merely about existence, but about obstinately resisting the engulfing darkness. Then, as abruptly as the nightmare had initiated, it ceased. Following Mary Jane Kelly, a silence descended. The Ripper's reign of horror had seemingly concluded as suddenly as it had manifested. Byways of Whitechapel exhaled a collective sigh of relief. A chilling episode in their chronicle concluded. However, the enigma surrounding the Ripper's true identity, that was a saga far from being unraveled. The enigmatic avenues of Whitechapel concealed their mysteries effectively. Despite the relentless efforts of the Victorian constabulary, Jack the Ripper remained a riddle. With the commencement of the Ripper's horrific reign, the Victorian law enforcement found themselves navigating uncharted waters. The economically deprived and densely populated district of Whitechapel presented a formidable terrain for an inquiry of such magnitude. The intricate street design, coupled with the rudimentary investigative techniques of the era, made it exceedingly challenging to accumulate compelling evidence. In the aftermath of these savage homicides, the press was teeming with conjecture and hypotheses. The populace was simultaneously petrified and enthralled by the macabre incidents transpiring in their metropolis. This fervent media scrutiny birthed the notorious moniker, Jack the Ripper, an epithet forever imprinted in the chronicles of criminal history. Over the decades, an array of theories and suspects have emerged. Among the accused were individuals like Montague Druitt, Michael Ostrog, and Aaron Kosminski. Each contender had their own captivating narrative and grounds for suspicion, yet none could be conclusively related to the atrocities. As time marched on, the Ripper's true persona remained cloaked in obscurity. Hypotheses varied from credible to utterly absurd, with some even postulating royal intrigue or the implication of high-profile figures of the era. Despite the Victorian constabulary's tenacious endeavors, they were ultimately futile. The stark reality was that the scientific and probing resources within their grasp were simply not advanced enough to expose the Ripper. The dearth of indisputable proof and the inexorable march of time only exacerbated the enigma shrouding the Ripper's identity. To this day, over years hence, the case continues to engross public interest. Fresh theories surface, old ones are discredited, and the pursuit for clarity remains as unyielding as ever. The true identity of Jack the Ripper remains veiled in obscurity, a nameless phantom that continues to linger in the chronicles of criminal history. The legend of Jack the Ripper, akin to the mist-laden byways of Whitechapel, persistently withholds its enigmas. Unyielding, it continues to enthrall, to petrify, and to pique curiosity. This perpetual allure attests to the conundrum that still engulfs the case, a conundrum that has permeated our communal psyche, stoked by the macabre severity of the offenses and the obscurity of the malefactor. The Ripper's reign of dread profoundly revolutionized society, unveiling the severe realities of Victorian London, an urban landscape wrestling with indigence, debauchery, and civil turbulence. This, subsequently, influenced an array of literary and theatrical creations, with novelists and dramatists extracting inspiration from the terrifying narrative, thereby augmenting the Ripper's notorious heritage. Even now, beyond a century later, investigation and conjecture related to the case persist relentless. Innovative hypotheses are tabled, antiquated ones are refuted, yet the fact remains shrouded. Each fresh disclosure, each novel suspect merely introduces an additional stratum to the enigma that is Jack the Ripper. Thus, the narrative of Jack the Ripper withstands a chilling echo of the malevolence that can hide in the core of a metropolis and in the essence of a man.